FNCS Grand Finals might be over, but the content does not stop. Today's video, we're going to be going over everything we learned after Grands. This includes talking about, is Peterbot now the GOAT? Has Venya, Pixie, and Marius established themselves as the best trio on all of EU? How can we fix the meta, and so much more? Before this video starts though, please subscribe to the channel if you guys are new, as we try our best to upload daily competitive content for you guys. If you want to support me even more, the best way to do so is by using code KDOG in the Fortnite item shop. Follow me on my Twitch, link to the description down below, because we're going to continue to watch all of these tournaments over there. Without further ado though, let's get straight into this video. So I think the first thing we need to talk about, and one of the main glaring issues with the game right now, is the surge trading meta needs to go away. There is far and away way too many teams that are trading surge right now. Basically all of the top tier 1 teams, especially on NA, we're quite literally surge trading like 10 out of the 12 games in Grands. It's super bad for the broadcast because they have very little to show between the early and the mid games, and like most of these pros aren't even trying to hide it anymore. It's basically just considered the meta at this point. So surge trading is just awful right now, and it also leaves an unfair advantage for the teams that aren't doing it in the lobby. The way that the surge trading works, especially on NA, is all of the top tier 1 teams are doing it, and then it leaves all of the mid tier and like the worst tier teams on the lobby to be forced to fight for surge, or they're just going to die to it every single game, which is basically what we saw. I think if the Clicks versus Peterbot storyline wasn't so big in this grand finals, then people would be complaining a lot more. Like if Peterbot was just fully running away with this Grands, people would see how bad this meta actually is and would be complaining about it way more than they are right now. How can Fortnite actually fix this? I still don't 100% know. We have no FNCS next season though, so I hope they use next season as like a trial to try out different things that could potentially combat the surge trading meta. But this can just not be the future of Fortnite competitive. We need to get this out of here as soon as possible. The next thing I want to talk about is two separate things about Peterbot. I'm going to talk about the thing with him being the GOAT, but the other thing that I want to talk about, and I feel like not very many people have been saying, is Peterbot looks very beatable right now. Even though he still won, I think it's still fair to say that his FNCS dominance is still kind of slowing down after losing last season and barely winning this season. I think it is kind of to be expected though, after the unprecedented dominance we saw him have in duos with Poyo last year. That was nearly almost impossible to keep up, but I remember there was a real time when everybody thought that Peter could just dominate forever, and even though he still won this Grands, I think it is very possible for multiple different trios to beat him each and every single season. Cash Cups might be still kind of the same story with him just dominating Cash Cups, but for FNCS time, for teams that have good strategies cooked up, I feel like he is very beatable now. But back to some of the positives about him, because of course he did just win Grand Finals, giving him his 5th ever FNCS Grands, which puts him now just 1 Grand Finals away from tying the record for the most Grand Finals ever. I think that we do just have to call him the GOAT now, as he does have 5 FNCS wins at this point. His accomplishments are almost there, and he is far and away like the most skilled player that a lot of us have probably ever watched play the game. You can definitely still make the longevity argument for somebody like Booga, but I think just the pure run that Peterbot is on right now, and his fighting ability is like nobody else we have ever seen, while being one of the smartest players in the entire game as well. He is a type of player that is a once in a generation type of talent, and I think now that he has the GOAT title, I don't think anybody is ever going to take it away from him, because we have to assume that this is not going to be the last FNCS that he's ever going to win. I think he will eventually break the record for the most Grand Finals wins of all time. I don't think we're ever going to see somebody catch up to him in not only FNCS wins, but also just pure skill in general for a very long time, if not ever. I also want to give huge credit to Cold and Ritual on that trio as well though, because Peterbot didn't even look like the best player on that trio. I know he did lead for elims and damage numbers, but if you were watching the games, Cold and Ritual had some insane dual clutches. Cold had one of the highest damage ratios as well. I'm so happy that we're finally getting away from the Ritual sold narrative also. Ritual is playing out of his mind. I think Cold was probably the best player on that trio by a slim amount. I feel like you could still make the argument for Peterbot, since he did have the solo clutch towards the end of the tournament. But the thing about Peter is I feel like we just always expect him to have some crazy solo clutch moment, and that also adds to his GOAT case as potentially one of the most clutch players in Fortnite history as well. It was just an insane Grand Finals performance from all of them all around. Let's talk about the EU Grand Finals winners though, of Venya, Pixie, and Marius, and I think they have a real argument for being potentially the best high ground team on EU. I said this going into FNCS, this is such a high ground oriented team, and they showed exactly that in Grand Finals, getting the most amount of wins out of anybody in Grands on EU, winning 4 out of the 12 total games. I think Queasy still is the king of high ground on EU, but Venya, Pixie, and Marius are making a real argument for potentially being that next team up to be the next high ground kings. The next thing we have to talk about, and one of the other most controversial things of the weekend, are zone polls rigged in Fortnite. Now this was a very controversial topic for many of the different pros. We saw even some pros just basically straight up say that they are rigged. The amount of north zones that we saw in this grand finals was absolutely insane. I think on day 2 it did slow down a little bit with the north polling zones, but we got to see a lot more like mountain zones on day 2. I don't personally think zones are rigged. I think it was kind of just an anomaly of how many zones were actually pulling north. It definitely is suspicious, and I think there definitely is a higher possibility of zones pulling to one side of the map compared to another. I don't think zones are like 100% rigged. A trio that I am a little bit concerned for the future of them is the trio of Agers, Acorn, and Pollo. Now we all know that they did have an underwhelming Grands, and Pollo already not wanting to necessarily stick with these guys in the first place in general. Them now still being forced to play the rest of the year together after getting 5th place. I know the vibes were already not good on the trio. I can't even imagine what they look like now. The thing about this team is the talent level is still there for this team. Like Acorn is arguably the best IGL on NA, Agers is arguably one of the best fraggers on NA, and Pollo is coming off of winning 4 FNCSs in a row, and unfortunately his streak is over now. But like nobody can tell me that that team doesn't have the pure like player capability to finish top 3 and potentially win every single Grand. I don't know what was going on with them this grand finals. It was far and away their worst performance of the entire season, and probably their worst performance since they formed together. They didn't even look close to the trios of Clix or Peterbot in this Grands. I think the only thing they can do from here is continue to work together, try to build up their chemistry, but that is going to be a very difficult thing to do when it seems like Pollo is just stuck on wanting to play with Peter still. I don't really think it is still a real possibility that they sign the disband forms, because I don't know what better players Agers and Acorn would get besides Pollo if they were to sign the forms. At least this trio has already booked their spot into the global championship, so they don't have to worry about fighting for one of only 2 land spots next season. But these guys really need to step up their game. For Doxy, Pablo, and Chino are going to be scary for the rest of the year. They are potentially going to be getting the best drop spots each and every single season, uncontested. They have just proved that they have Grands winning potential. The future is so bright for these guys. Even if they get contested at a super good drop, Doxy is known to be one of the best off-spawn players in the entire game. Off-spawn aura is at like a full 10 out of 10 right now. It literally scared off the FNCS champions and a trio that a lot of us would probably assume is the best fighting team on all of EU. I think if they could do that, they have the potential to beat anybody off-spawn. And I said this in my video yesterday, but I'm very curious about the possibility of them maybe contesting Peterbot at LAN, because we know Peter's going to continue to go the best drop spots on NA, and then Doxy has already said that he's going to be going the best drop spots on EU. So how is that actually going to fare once LAN comes around, and who would win that off-spawn battle? Back over to NA, I think Clix, Higgs, and Yamzo have officially proved that they can keep up with Peterbot on kills, especially in a meta where it's more surge trading and not so much fighting. Peterbot, Code, and Ritual finished with 99 total elims in this grand finals, and then Clix, Higgs, and Yamzo only got 8 less than that with 91 total elims, which was still 23 more than third places of Reed, Cooper, and Curly when they got 68. Clix and Peter look like far and away the 2 best trios on this entire region. The gap between second and third place was 149 total points. I was already doing this before this FNCS, but I think you have to put Clix's trio every single season now as a potential grand finals winner, not only based off what they showed last season finishing in 3rd, but this season as well, only being 11 points away from getting all 3 of their first ever FNCS championships. The Clix versus Peterbot rivalry is nowhere near done yet, and hopefully Acorn can insert himself back into the mix of that, NA Grands is going to continue to be absolute cinema. We've talked a lot about NA, so let's talk some more about EU. I think that Malibuca and Vino are arguably the two best trios on the entire region, even though their placements didn't replicate that. Malibuca finishing in 4th place after being first in day 1 by over 150 points when uncon. They look like by far and away the best team on day 1. Nobody else on EU really looked as close to them in terms of consistency, in terms of also being able to frag out as well. I don't know if them and Vino are going to continue to contest each other at Lone Wolf Lair going into next season as well, but I think Vico, Vino, and Flixie, even though they finished in 6th place, which isn't necessarily considered like the best placement in Grands, especially for a trio their caliber, but they were literally in winning potential going all the way up until like game 10 or 11 of this tournament. They still finished with the most amount of elims. Vico was playing out of his mind. This team always is going to have that fragging ability, which will separate them from anybody else on the region. I saw a lot of people doubting this team going into FNCS because of things like their drop spot, and so them coming out with a strategy of literally teeny stratting on day 1 and then contesting 1st place for 6 out of 6 games on day 2. They made this grand finals so entertaining to watch, and they also showed that they need to be in the conversation for winning FNCS every single season. Another one of the most interesting storylines for me going into the next FNCS season is one of the big name trios on NA will not be able to make land since there is only 2 spots left. I know there is still the potential of all of these trios just splitting up, but we have to assume that any 3 combinations of these 9 players right here are still going to form out of this. Right now, either Kanata, Bolton, Sphinx, Booger Rapid and Threats, or Rise, Muzz, and Yapko. Even though it looks like Yapko is going back to EU, one of these 3 teams will not be able to make it into LAN. I think that does potentially open up the possibility of one of these guys maybe playing West for a season, because their choices are either winning West and making it to LAN or placing most likely top 6 or 7. But it does really suck that one of these super talented and 100% all 3 of these teams should be in LAN, but they're not going to be there now because of NA West. I think something else pretty crazy is how is there still no reconnect button in Fortnite after 7 years? We literally see Malibuca not be able to load into a game when they were contested off spawn by Vino, and Threats crashed in the end game when they were on height with good mats as well, and a potential spot to qualify for LAN this season. I feel like there's got to be some type of option for either a reconnect button, and we see basically every other competitive game have one besides Fortnite. It just really does suck for all of these players that get affected by crashing, and there really is just nothing they can do about it. Pigstorm and Demas are 100% the future of EU. This trio was one of the most, if not the most impressive teams to me this entire weekend, and not just because they were able to pull off a top 3, but them going from 15th to 3rd place in their 2nd ever grand finals, with all of them being as young as they are, shows more maturity and belief in themselves than a lot of the veteran players that we see today. Like, there were so many players that if they saw themselves in 15th after day 1 and know that they should be doing better, they would have just completely given up. But all of these guys being around that 15 to 16 range, and especially like I said earlier, only being in their 2nd ever grand finals, and somehow being able to clutch up a 3rd place in this gives me even more faith in the future of this team. I think this is another one of those trios that we always have to give potential to winning grand finals if they are going to be uncontested. I think in general, this grand finals on EU especially, we really did get to see that the future of EU is so bright, with so many different talented players starting to make a name for themselves on the region. And especially when you have the big wildcard player like somebody like Shark, the future of EU is just so bright, man. And then the last thing I want to talk about is Reed, Cooper, and Curly getting top 3 while changing their IGL a week before grand finals, Reed getting dropped multiple times before FNCS, and Curly just starting to come up this year is one of the other most impressive things of this entire weekend. I feel like for Reed especially too, with how much controller gets slandered now, and people saying that it's impossible to place in a grand finals if you have a controller player on your team, like all 3 of these players on this team seem to be some of the just like most disrespected players, from getting dropped by teammates to just people not really believing in them. And so them all forming up together to place top 3 in grand finals and qualify for LAN while having less than a month of experience together is just such a cool story to see. Huge shout out to Cooper for proving that he can still be one of the best IGLs on the entire region. And then Reed and Curly, they already had that chemistry together from playing a couple of duo tournaments together back when Curly was even more of an underrated player. Like, the vibes just have to be so good on this team now. And even though this was one of the more random trios that formed, they were one of the most impressive teams when things were all said and done. Other than that though, that is not where the content is going to stop. Tomorrow I should be dropping my grading every trio in FNCS Grand Finals performance. So make sure you guys just subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you do not miss that video. Please just go K-Dog in the Fortnite item shop if you guys want to support me even more. YouTube says to enjoy 1 to 2 videos up on the screen right now, so go check them out if you guys haven't already. Follow me on my Twitter and my Twitch, linked in the description down below. Thank God for another day, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace out.